We're going to be looking in John chapter 11 in just a few moments, but I want to use John 11 as part of a testimony that I want to give you today of the situation that Donna and I have faced over the last few weeks. I said a couple of weeks ago that there would be reports of miracles, and the very first one was Nick and Kathy. Amen. And I'm going to tell you about another one this morning, and they just keep coming. We just keep hearing more and more things that the Lord is doing. Having said that, you need to also realize that Satan will step up his game as well, and we need to be ready for it. In John chapter 11, it says, "Now there was a certain man was sick, named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick." That tells me that Jesus hung around the common folk. You didn't see him in palaces and governor's mansions and hobnobbing around with the rich. He was on the street with the average Joe. That's who he really related to, because these other people didn't feel like they had a need for God. But we understand that. And so therefore his sisters sent unto Jesus, saying, "Behold, he whom thou lovest is sick." Lazarus was sick. And when Jesus heard that, he said this, and I want you to listen carefully. "This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby." Most of you know the story, how Jesus waited 4 more days before he went there. Lazarus was dead and buried, yet God raised him up from the dead, because it was not his time to go. And I want you to understand, when it is not your time to go, you ain't going anywhere. We saw that, not only with great sickness, but literally raised back from the dead, because it was not next time. When it is your time, there isn't a doctor on this earth that can keep you here. But when it is not your time to go, God will fix it every time. Donna's journey, and she's watching right now. Hi, honey. She hopefully will be with us next Sunday. Amen. Donna's journey with having heart trouble was all about the glory of God, and I know that now. I'm hard-headed. Y'all need to understand that about me. Donna knows that. She knows all about me, but I'm hard-headed. And sometimes God has to knock me over the head to get my attention. But I do know the plan now. I understand what this was all about. Even as a teenager and athletic, Donna had high blood pressure. And nobody could understand where it was coming from. And she hadn't even met me yet, so she didn't have a reason to have high blood pressure. I'll give you a reason to have high blood pressure. I know some people, all they got to do is look at me, and it goes off the scale. We married. We raised 5 kids, and she had incredible strength and energy all of the time. That's where Anna gets that from. And I've never seen her wearied. But in the last few years, she started showing signs of heart trouble. We went to countless doctor's appointments. They prescribed everything but the kitchen sink, and nothing worked for very long. Even my potions and my herbal medicines, which have cured a number of people in here, and I'm not bragging on that, I just do a lot of reading, none of that fazed her either. Nothing worked. Then she went into AFib, and it got really bad. Her pulse was sky high, and she was getting winded, and They took her to the hospital and shocked her 3 times. Still nothing. So then they went through the heart cath lab and did an ablation where they take a laser and burn stuff in the heart. And that worked for a while, but she still did not feel better. She kept getting more and more winded. Now, bear in mind that less than 5 years ago, we could walk up on mountain trails for 5 miles at a time, and there was no problem, even with her spine problem. Now she could barely go 50 feet. And every night she would tell me, I'm the only one that ever got to hear it, that her feet burned and swelled every night. But yet when I touched them, they felt like a block of ice. Nothing that she went to the doctor with it, they'd look at it and didn't say anything, and whatever they did give her, if they did, wouldn't work. So a few weeks ago, she got so winded that I just took her straight to the ER on a Thursday morning. They found that her lungs were filling up with fluid. And they did a battery of tests on her, and they found that she had a blockage in the main coronary artery going to her heart, and it was 90 to 95% blocked, and they couldn't even realize how she could walk with it blocked like that. They thought, though, that a simple stent would correct it. The first doctor said, let's do that. And they took her up to the OR or the cath lab, and they brought her down pretty quick, and the doctor came with her, and he had a kind of a glum look on his face, and my heart started to sink when I saw the look on his face. He said the damage was too extensive. An open heart bypass was the only solution to fix that. We even met with or talked with more of the doctors, and they all agreed that was the only solution. So then they sent the surgeon down. The surgeon came down and just looked at her bluntly and looked at me and said she could die from the surgery because of her weakened condition. I did not need to hear that, but I did. On top of that, a couple of days later, she got a kidney stone for the first time in her life. And I had to rush her to the ER with that. And so they kept her. And they moved the surgery up 2 more days, and so she had to stay in there from Sunday until Thursday so that her kidney could recover. Well, the devil seized the opportunity to attack me over that with every weapon he had. It was like that evil commander on Star Trek that screamed, "Fire everything!" because that's what he did at me. He fired everything he had. And I said me because Donna was not even fazed by any of this. Don't you hate that? Now, on the morning of her surgery, they were going to wheel her down to do open heart surgery. If that had been me, I'd have been laying there snotting and hollering and carrying on. She said, "I think I'll take a nap." And so she just went on to sleep, and the nurse came in and said, "I've never seen nothing like this." She said, "If it wasn't for the HIPAA laws, I'd take a picture of that and post it on the internet." I said, "What?" He said, "Here's somebody sleeping right before they go to the ER, and it doesn't look like it bothers her at all," and it didn't. Nothing bothers Donna.
Amen.
Well, I got to tell you, what Satan meant for evil, God meant for good.
That's right.
When they were operating on her, now you got to remember, she'd had every scan, every x-ray, even catheters and all that stuff. The anesthesiologist found something that nobody else found. A 1-inch jagged hole in her heart that had been there for 59 years. 59 years. The surgeon immediately fixed it. Nobody knew it was there until they got a camera down in there. Then they did the single bypass with success, and they fixed the AFib problem as well. Of course, as a result, she has teenage blood pressure and teenage pulse, and I think I'm going to be the one on the walker soon and not her. I went on the Mayo Clinic website and started studying up on this. And if they had put that stent in, she would have died shortly. If they had not found that hole, she also would have died shortly, because according to the Mayo Clinic, she was already living on borrowed time with a hole in her heart, and no one hardly ever made it to that age without dying. That was extremely rare. God set that up for them to find that. And that was the only way they could find it, was with open heart surgery. And now, as a result of that, her feet don't burn anymore, and they don't swell anymore, and they're warm, and her pulse is excellent. The anesthesiologist was so excited about it the night after her surgery, he flagged me down in the hallway, wanted to talk to me. And he said, nobody ever found that hole. He said, but I put a camera down there and I found it. And I said, how in the world did you do that? And he stuck his chest there and he said, because I got good equipment. He was very proud. Then he whipped out his phone and showed me the picture of the hole, and it looked like a shotgun slug had gone through her heart. It was that awful looking. And he said, yeah, that was her problem there. That's what caused all of her blood pressure and swelling and all that. And he said, and I found it with my camera and we fixed it. He was very excited, bless his heart. God put that surgery off for 2 days so just the right team of people would be there. The right people. But more than that, more important than that, God knew, and I'm going to say it because she's my wife and it's the truth, that people still needed this powerful, anointed woman to remain and help me. So he set it all up so he alone could get the glory for it. Amen. I told the doctor that was God's hand. Now for my side of the coin, it's not as glamorous as hers. At the age of 14, 50 years ago, I used to like to do a lot of hiking. I've hiked up Tobacco Row Mountain 5 different times, and I walked all the way from Monroe Elementary School to the base of that mountain. I climbed the mountain, I came back down, and I walked all the way back to Monroe School. Try that one time and see. That was a lot of fun though. But my first trip up that mountain, I walked up on a marijuana field. And I could tell by the way that they on the side of the mountain that they had it cultivated. And while I was standing there looking at it, me and 2 of my buddies, I heard bullets flying over my head. And I looked down, and these 2 men in their 20s with 22 automatic rifles started shooting at us. And they chased us all the way up that mountain. We outran them. You could bet we did. And bullets were breaking limbs over my head, and we kept hollering at them to stop, and all they would do is whistle to each other to signal whatever that meant, and the bullets were flying. I don't know how many times they shot at us, and it's a miracle we did not get hit. That's terrifying, let me tell you. Then another time in my life, my Toyota station wagon got caught in a high water crossing at a bridge where a big storm had happened, and I'd been in a recording studio that night and didn't hear it, and I drove into the water, and it lifted my station wagon up and started to wash it down the creek. And I did the fastest praying I've ever done in my life. I was terrified, but God got me out of that and even saved my car. And then once, as a deputy sheriff, well, actually hundreds of times I'd done this, I went in a jail cell with 8 men, and we were never allowed to carry weapons when we went up in there. I had to take even the tear gas and mace and everything. It couldn't have anything. Went in there with no gun belt or anything. And they were all in this one cell block for very, very dangerous crimes, and several of them were in there for murder. And I had to go in there and repair something on the plumbing. And the biggest one in there, as I walked halfway across the cell block, the biggest one in there that was in there for murder got right up in my face, and he said this, and I quote, "We could kill you before they could come in here and save you, and there's nothing you can do about it." And I looked him right in the eye, and I said, "You can't do anything unless God allows it." And he started doing like it and backing up. Either he saw something or he respected God, I don't know, but I don't care. He got away from me and he backed off. So I have known fear and terror, believe you me, and I usually keep my cool through all of that, but not when it came to Donna. We have functioned as one unit for 36 years. I not only love her, I'm still in love with her. And she is one half of what we are together. Actually, she's more like 3/4. She's a far better person than I am. And I mean that. I never let her see what it was doing to me, all of that, because she was so pleasant and so upbeat, and I could not let her see that. So I concealed it, although I'm sure she may have suspected it. I would even get the dry heaves once in a while over that. You don't need to lie to you. But I would put on a smile when I went to her room. We spent the time before her surgery, those 4 days, just talking and holding hands, and we watched a little TV, and Donna was making sure everything was taken care of in the ministry work that she was doing, and she delegated it to this one and delegated it to that one and had everything lined up. She was so worried that something wouldn't get done. And she even asked for the laptop so she could catch up on the last stuff before she went to surgery. That's Donna. All the time, though, in my defense, regardless, I never ever let that keep me from serving God. I want you to understand I'm a soldier in God's army. And I cannot allow feelings like that to stop me from working and serving Him. So I did all of my stuff. I was only out 2 days here because I was sitting with her in the hospital. And thank you, Candy, for filling in. But that does not run me away. And I want you to understand, no matter what kind of terror or apprehension or anxiety you feel, you are a soldier in the army of God, and you do not have the luxury of running. You never do. You stand your ground no matter what. Don't you think the soldiers at D-Day storming the beach were terrified? Of course they were, but they still did it anyway. And so let me say that. Don't ever use that as an excuse to back down. Never. I asked for prayer for her from so many people in so many groups. 2 of her little grandsons, Anna's little thugs, Eden and Ray, went up to her the night before her bed and said, "We are praying for you, Grandma." And Anna said, "You should hear them pray." They did pray for her, and they meant it. Let me tell you something. Those children's prayers get through a lot quicker than ours do sometimes, because they don't doubt for 1 minute that God's going to do what they ask. That's why you got to be like a little child when you accept the Lord, and never try to think it out as an adult. Even a doctor friend of mine that wasn't involved came by that night and laid hands on her and prayed. You know who you are, Doc. Thank you for that. So I went home on the night before surgery. And it was a Wednesday night. Church was over. And I stopped by the chapel. And it was after 9 o'clock, so I went in the dark, and I didn't even bother to turn the lights on. I got down at the altar and I poured my heart out to the Lord, and I told him how I felt and all about my anxiety and my fears, and I asked him to save Donna's life. Now, he had already planned that, but he wanted me to ask, I'm sure. So I got in the car to come home. And I turned the radio on, our station, and lo and behold, a local group was singing, "There's a Miracle in the Making." Let me tell you something. God speaks through radio too. Peace flooded my soul for the very first time since all this started. And I actually got a little bit of sleep that night. But God won't done with talking to me. And he knows I'm hard-headed. Her surgery was very early, and they were going to take her down to the OR at 5:30. So here I was at 4 in the morning, flying up Memorial Avenue, trying to get to the hospital as quick as I could to spend a little time with her. Turned the radio on again. There was Donna on the radio singing "The Only Real Peace." So I started rejoicing on my way in. God showed me plainly what his plan was. My closest friend and several of my kids sat with me that day, and the time went by quite well. I wasn't upset at all. And they were very good at calling me on the phone and telling me what blow by blow was. And they even sent the cardiac nurse down to talk with me and so forth and so on. And they acted like it was business as usual, and it wasn't anything to it. Donna made it with flying colors. She is a brand new Donna. And so I am so grateful for that, and that God sent just the right people to work on her. Now, my toughest ordeal right now, and let's just be honest and tell it like it is, it's loneliness. Now, she's told the director this morning, "I'm done, I'm going home." And so they're hurrying to get the paperwork ready over there to send her home, because she's not going to stay at all anymore. She's ready to go at the rehab center. But missing her has been really, really tough. I kid you not. Now, I know it's just 14 days, but you've got to understand, we've never been apart for 36 years, except 2 days. So it really grinds. But let's look at what the scriptures has to say about this. 2 Corinthians chapter 1. Here Paul said, "Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ by the will of God, and Timothy our brother, unto the church of God which is at Corinth, with all the saints that are in Achaia. Grace be to you and peace from God our Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ." Listen carefully. "Blessed be God, even the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort, who comforteth us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble by the comfort wherewith we ourselves were comforted of God." You share what God showed you. You share what God did for you. "For as the sufferings of Christ abound in us, so our consolation also abounds. Whether we be afflicted, it is for your consolation and salvation, which is effectual in the enduring of the same sufferings which we also suffer. Whether we be comforted, it is for your consolation and salvation." What is this saying? That we who have been through any kind of ordeal like this need to use those experiences to lift up the other people in here. God doesn't let us go through anything without equipping us to use that for his glory, to help somebody else that may be getting ready to go through the same thing or are already in it. There are widows in this church. There are widowers in this church by either death or divorce. Let me tell you a little something about that. Divorce can be just as bad as a death, if not worse, because there is no closure to that many times. And there are people sitting in these pews down here that have lost their mate by either death or divorce or whatever, and loneliness is a very tough thing to deal with. God let me go through that because, I don't like my own company. I get bored with me after a few minutes. Even the cats get bored with me after a few minutes. I've seen every version of Walker, Texas Ranger. I've seen every action movie, and I'm sick of TV. Let me tell you whatever. And so he taught me what that felt like. I needed to know what that felt like. Even though I've prayed for people that's gone through stuff here, sometimes you got to get a little taste of it to understand what somebody else is feeling. And I understand that. And looking at God's big picture, I know what he was doing by this. He wanted me to see what it would feel like. That's what he wanted. So here's what I'm telling you. Church, listen carefully. You look around and you see somebody that's alone, you invite them to lunch. Even if you've never done it before, or you make it a point to go and visit with them, or you take them out for lunch during the week, 2 hours a week in church is not going to cut it. These people need fellowship. Get together with them. Take them out to a meal or just go fellowship with them. And finally, the Lord has laid on my heart that there is a desperate need in this church for a singles ministry. That is something we have never done. But there's a lot of single people in this church that need fellowship. Because it is not a lot of fun to come home from church and then look at the walls for the rest of the day. It's not. I'll be the first one to tell you that. Maybe get together once a week or every 2 weeks or whatever and have a time of fellowship. Let me tell y'all something. I got a facility over there at the school, a great big conference room, a full kitchen. I got everything in there, and it's yours if you want to use that to have fellowship in. All you got to do is tell me we want to do it, and I'll have the air turned on for you when you get there.